Okay, then I'm predicting the Cincinnati Bengals record prediction. So looking at the roster, Cincinnati Bengals to me actually don't have the most talented roster in the AFC. Joe Burrow probably has the least skill position players he's had in his career. They lost Tyler Boyd, they lost Joe Mixon, and they replaced him with Zach Moss and rookies, which I think are downgrades. And the Bengals offensive line is not as bad as they are the previous years, but I wouldn't exactly call them a strength either. And the Bengals defense, their Bengals defense, I think was the reason they made it to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and it just doesn't look that good. Defensive line, Hubbard and Hendrickson is good. Logan Wilson is good, but I'm really worried about their secondary. Even though they brought in Geno still, I still think their secondary can be a big liability and their ability to stop the run. So, but they still have Joe Burrow. They still have one of the top quarterbacks as long as he returns healthy. But you have your first game versus the New England Patriots, an ideal first game. Um, an ideal first game. The Patriots are still rebuilding. They brought a bunch of new pieces on offense and defense, returning players. And even if Joe Burrow does have his early season rust, Bengals team should easily deal with the Patriots starting a new coach. So I'm taking the Bengals here. Then you have them versus the Chiefs. Chiefs, to me, they're just a more established team. Burrow usually, like I said, has early season rust. Chiefs, I think they brought in a bunch of new wide receivers, which will challenge that Bengals secondary. And Bengals do play well versus the Chiefs, but I don't think the Bengals defense can stop that Chiefs offense. And that Bengals offense, with Joe Burrow's early season um, struggles, I don't see the Bengals beating the Chiefs. I'm taking the Chiefs here. Then you have them versus the Commanders. Commanders, they're still rebuilding also. Ben Bengals offense, even losing a couple of pieces, and Joe Burrow, they should easily carve right through that Commanders defense. The Commanders offense can have potential, but just too early in the season, I gotta take the Bengals with home field advantage. Then week 4 versus the Panthers. Panthers right now are still a rebuilding team. They won't challenge an AFC contender like the Bengals. I don't trust Bryce Young at all, and that Panthers defense, even though it was not the worst last year, they won't be enough to stop the Bengals. I'm taking the Bengals here. And you have them versus the Ravens. Ravens divisional rival, very really hard to predict, but early on in the season, I think Lamar Jackson will get the upper hand of Joe Burrow. I think the Ravens have a really good offense, especially with Mark Andrews returning. I don't think that Bengals defense can stop, so I'm going to take the Ravens here. And you have them versus the Giants. Giants, another rebuilding team. Bengals, they should do well versus Daniel Jones. That Giants defense can cause problems, but Joe Burrow, that offense is a veteran offense. They should do well versus the Giants defense. I'm going to take the Bengals here. Then you have them versus the Browns. Browns, another divisional rival that gives the Bengals trouble. I think that Browns defense will be too much for that Bengals offense to handle. And I believe the Browns are a more well-rounded team. I think their offense can do well versus that Bengals defense, especially near the mid-season. Nick Chubb should start returning to form here. So I'm going to take the Browns here. In week 8 versus the Eagles. Eagles to me are a very interesting team, similar to the Bengals in some ways. Um, they have to rebound from last season. The Eagles have a really good offense. Jalen Hurts' leg, I think, will cause problems. It's going to be a shootout, but with Philadelphia's aging secondary, I'm going to take the Bengals here, especially with home field advantage. Then you have week 9 versus the Raiders. Raiders defense, similar to the Giants, I think is a really good defense, can give Bengals maybe some trouble, especially with Zach Moss. But that Raiders offense is just not good enough at all to challenge the team like a Bengals. So I'm taking the Bengals here. And you have them versus the Ravens. I just don't see the Ravens. Divisional AFC North is way too competitive. I don't see the Ravens sweeping the Bengals, even with home field advantage on a Thursday night. Giving the Bengals here. And Week 11 versus the Chargers. I don't know if you guys know this yet, but I'm not a fan of the Chargers. I think the Bengals offense should do light work of that Chargers defense, which other than a few superstars is not that good, and that Chargers offense just doesn't have the explosiveness to deal with that Bengals to keep up with the Bengals. I'm taking the Bengals here, especially coming off a mini bye. Then you have a bye, and then you have them versus the Steelers. Um, Divisional game again is really tough. Steelers play the Bengals well. Steelers have a very bend don't break defense. Their defense is really good, but similar Russ Justin Fields, not enough. I'm going to take the Bengals here, especially with home field advantage. Then Week 14 versus the Cowboys on Monday night. I believe this is going to be a very good game. Cowboys still very talented. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb will give the Bengals problems. However, the Cowboys don't have much of a run game. But that Cowboys defense, I'm really worried about that Cowboys pass rush affecting Joe Burrow. But I believe Joe Burrow can dice up that Cowboys secondary, and the Bengals will just enough, especially with the way um, the Cowboys struggle. Especially the way the Cowboys struggle against winning teams. I'm going to take the Bengals here. Then you have Week 15 versus the Titans. Bengals on a big win streak. I think this is definitely a trap game. Titans, they definitely improved on offense. They got Calvin Ridley. And the Titans defense, even losing Mike Vrabel, should continue good. And I think the Bengals are going to fall into that trap on a short week. I'm taking the Titans here, upsetting the Bengals. Then you have Week 16 versus the Browns. Like I said earlier, the Browns and Bengals usually split. Um, and I had the Browns win the first one. The Bengals have home field advantage on a short week. And then the Browns defense usually struggles on the road, so I'm taking the Bengals here. In Week 17 versus the Broncos, Broncos another rebuilding team, another trap game for the Bengals. But the Broncos defense isn't that good, neither is their offense. Bengals are probably vying for the number one seed or winning the division, so I'm taking the Bengals here. And Week 18 versus the Steelers, I believe the Steelers are going to split with the Bengals. They always do. I'm going to take the Steelers here. So Indianapolis, the Bengals going 12-5, 13 in the division, 7-1 at home, and 5-4 away.